Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci d'avoir répondu à l'invitation de EnerGaïa pour cette nouvelle édition 2024. Bienvenue dans cette salle Gaïa dans quelques instants.
Welcome to Gaia. In a few minutes' time, you'll be able to opening roundtable. The title is Renewable Energy, How to Make this Line of Activity Attractive to All Publics. I would like to call up to the podium the Vice President of the region in charge of climate and sustainable habitat, Agnès Langevin.
Je vous en prie. Les marches sont de l'autre côté. Je vous en prie.
J'ai pas besoin du casque pour parler.
Non.
Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Good morning, everybody.
Alors je vais peut-être... Voilà. Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased indeed to welcome you here at this plenary session for the 18th edition of EnerGaïa. Obviously, you will have noticed that there are lots and lots of people again this year. We expect more than 1,800 visitors, 500 exhibitors have booked spaces on various themes. You have the sustainable building, employment training. You have various different segments which we try to support when it comes to the ecological transition and the energy transition. So thank you once again for your participation. As you know, since 2016, at the instigation of Carol Denga, the Occitanie region, together with all the partners and the players, has decided to become a positive energy region. And it is focusing on energy efficiency, reduction in consumption, and also the development of renewable energies in order to reduce our CO2 footprint and use fewer fossil fuels. Therefore, to this end, we have a climate and energy agency now. We have a community of players who work with ADEME. The idea is together to mobilize people and succeed in this major challenge, this challenge which will enable us to ensure that we can still live on this planet, that it is still habitable. We want also to preserve biodiversity in all living things. We are rolling out a number of schemes, and we support all the renewable energy sectors, photovoltaics, but also hydroelectricity, wind power, offshore wind power. There are a lot of events that focus here on the structuring of offshore wind farms, and the Occitanie region is deeply engaged in this area. Likewise, here you will be able to see the various innovations pertaining to the energy transition. I think that everyone here can find a partner, the right company with which to work.
Dans les différentes conférences, pouvoir trouver aussi des retours d'expérience.
Through the conferences and through feedback and exchanges of information, you'll be able to capitalize on all this. With the roundtable this year, we wanted to focus in particular on training and employment, particularly of young people. Young people are a major pillar in our public policy in this region. These young people are the most concerned, after all, by the energy transition and the state of the planet
des ressources que nous pouvons, que
and
nous
the
devons
resources,
préserver.
of course, which we
Les
have
jeunes
to
qui sont
preserve.
malheureusement
Young
de plus
people,
en plus en situation
unfortunately,
de
are
précarité.
increasingly
Mais
in
aussi,
a
qui
precarious
sont,
situation,
comme nous, d'ailleurs aujourd'hui,
and like
dans
us
un climat à la
today,
fois d'incertitude sur le plan
they
politique et
suffer
budgétaire,
from
mais
great
aussi
uncertainty,
d'anxiété, d'éco-anxiété
anxiety
par rapport
when it comes
à une projection assez
to
pessimiste, peut-être
a
des
pessimistic
années,
view of the years
années
to
qui
come.
s'annoncent. Pour autant,
So they have
voilà,
this
nous devons
anxiety,
pas
just as
céder
we find it
à ce
rather,
pessimisme et continuer à
we're rather
aider
anxious at
toutes
the
ces
prospect
jeunesses.
of
Et
not
ça
having a
commence bien
budget.
sûr par dès
So
l'orientation,
the idea
et
is
la
to
formation pour
orientate the
l'emploi,
young people
pouvoir
properly,
soutenir,
to
pouvoir croiser à la fois
support
des besoins d'emploi internes pour les entreprises,
all concerned, to
pour les
help
associations
companies
qui
find
sont des acteurs
manpower,
importants
work
sur la
with the
transition, et de
associations
pouvoir
involved in the transition,
accompagner la
and
mutation
also we want
des métiers et
to
des emplois
provide
qui
support
sont
in the
aujourd'hui
changing
pouvoir
nature of jobs.
s'orienter vers des emplois au service de cette
Indeed,
transformation
we need more and more young people who will be willing to work in the field of the energy transition. So I'd like to thank all the speakers at this round table, the school Être, and young people who have joined us here, and at the end of the round table who will come up to the podium. I'd like to thank them for their participation. Behind me, you can see that this edition, the hallmark of this edition is solidarity and solidarities. I talked about precarious situations, and this encompasses energy precariousness, which affect many thousands of households in the region here. So we want to focus on solidarity when it comes to energy, collect donations when it comes to energy. You can contribute. At the end of the round table, I'll ask them to come up to the podium as well with the young people. The idea is to ensure that these donations of energy are used to combat those who cannot finance energy, who are precarious in this respect. I'll now give the floor back to the moderator of this round table. Please take a seat here. Agnès Langevin, in charge of climate, the Green Agreement, and sustainable habitat. Now, we have a number of other speakers for this round table, how to make this field attractive for all audiences, including young people who are very concerned about the future of the planet and the climate. Florent Messador is a member of the Regional Council of Young People in Occitanie. You've just finished a BA in ecology and biology. Thank you for being with us here today. Please come up and take a seat. In a few minutes' time, you'll be able to tell us why young people are not becoming involved in this sector. When we prepared for this meeting, we thought that, well, if at a very young age, children saw solar panels on the roof of their schools, they might think about going into that area later on. We'll be putting the question to people in secondary school. And Valérie Poplin will be talking about all these matters with us. She's the operational manager of the Campus des métiers et des qualifications d'excellence. You will be focusing on the interest young people may show in renewable energies. Now we have those who work to attract young people. Elisabeth Abrivat, who is in charge of corporate responsibility, and you deal with employment and training. You do a number of activities for school goers, and you work with people who are retraining and other people who have been unemployed for quite some time. This work is done in conjunction with the school Être, founded by Frédéric Matisse, who will join us here. He wrote this book, dreaming about a new kind of school, and indeed, this is a little ad for the school. The book Être provides training for those between the ages of 16 and 20, and the idea is to focus on green lines of activity. I'd like to talk now about an association that represents all the economic players in this area. Sylvain Roussel is responsible for development and partnerships with France Renewable. And in 2025, he will be setting up a portal, training, and this will provide all sorts of information about training in renewable energy. Thank you very much for having taken up this invitation to join us at this opening roundtable. This roundtable will be divided into 3 chapters. First of all, we'll look at jobs in renewable energy. Then we'll talk about what can be done to make these jobs even more attractive. And we'll ask whether recruiters should change their pitch to attract more people to the field of renewable energy, revolutionize recruitment techniques, perhaps. And you'll be able to react to the roundtable, and you'll be able to put your questions and share your experience. The technicians are giving me a little bit of support here. I think we can give them a round of applause. They've helped us to organize this conference at EnerGaïa. We're very pleased to have representatives of Être and EPF schools with us. These students are in the room, and secondary students from Montpellier. There are over 80 of them here in the room, and I'd like to thank them for being present this morning. Sylvain Roussel, we'll start with you. Question. We know that renewable energy is growing fast. Are they still having trouble recruiting? Good morning. Just before starting, I would like to thank the region and the organizing committee of EnerGaïa to having included employment as an opening theme. Often, this is a theme dealt with only in the afternoon, not in the opening ceremony. So this is a wonderful thing that the organizers have done, which I would like to commend them for. Yes, renewable energies are double-digit growth since 2019, between 10 and 33% growth rate when it comes to jobs in this area. To give you a few figures, between 2023 and 24, 50,000 jobs in solar energy and wind energy, 11,500 in Occitanie, 18,000 when it comes to solar energy and 32,000 when it comes to wind energy, with about 7,800 in offshore wind energy. As you can see, there are quite a lot of jobs there. Now, the question that arises is the following, and this is of major importance. It will be necessary to electrify the usages, and to do so, what you have to do, you need more clean electricity, be it nuclear power, renewable energies. And I'll give you a figure which I mentioned at a roundtable in June with a representative of Enedis and EDF. By 2030, 200,000 jobs will have to be created to electrify the usages. And we're just talking about EDF and Enedis. It's dizzying. We'll have to pick up this challenge altogether. And we'll have to be able to meet the shortage of manpower. Now, if you look at what's actually happening, we are competing with other jobs, and in particular, industry. Industry is also looking for skills similar to ours. Maintenance technicians, for example. And just yesterday, we have a number of training programs. There are 10 training programs in France when it comes to energy and building. Valérie Poplin, who runs the campus that focuses on renewable energies. Have you noted in the Occitanie region that there's a lack of qualified manpower? Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank you. I'm very pleased also, just as Sylvain Roussel mentioned, I'm very pleased that this subject is being broached as of the very opening of EnerGaïa this year. So indeed, it's no surprise. It's not a new topic. For the past 7 years, I've been working with the players in the region that is training entities and companies working in renewable energies. And for the past 7 years, recruiters and human resource managers have been talking about their difficulties. So clearly, we're talking about a sector where it's hard to recruit. Recruitment is very difficult. This can be explained by the general lack of a sort of a pool of young people being trained in technical fields. Young people in France don't seem very keen on technical jobs, be it young people or those who are undergoing retraining, in fact. It's important to underscore that it's difficult to recruit engineers, granted, but overall, we can feel fairly confident about the recruitment of engineers because we have some outstanding schools in this area that do a very good job. When it comes to the energy transition, there will be a shift in internal mobility. Engineers will probably migrate to our sector from other sectors, and this is already the case in oil and gas. What is a greater source of concern, because we're talking about bigger numbers, is the lack of technicians, as recalled by Sylvain, maintenance technicians, for example. That is very disquieting, because you can have a development engineer. Granted, there may be 10 or maybe 10 or 15 maintenance technicians will have to maintain these structures built by just one engineer. I imagine you agree with what's just been said in Valorem, Elisabeth Abriva. What kind of profiles are you finding difficult to recruit? I'd like to confirm what's just been mentioned. Might I just add a few words about Valorem? We are an integrated player. We produce and sell electricity, and we are multi-energy, solar, wind, hydrogen. Our company has several activities in the field of design, construction, and we're totally integrated. We do just about everything from beginning to end. That means there's a huge diversity, a huge range of skills in a group which comprises 500 people. You will find a very diverse range of skills and jobs. We have 36 offers of jobs on our recruitment site, and if you look, 6 are for technicians. Look up the other jobs available as well, but that is an area. Maintenance technicians, you talked about engineers, granted. We don't recruit only engineers, but we also look for project managers. These are positions which call for technical skills and soft skills as well, legal and regulatory knowledge and so on. Indeed, these are jobs where we'll find it difficult to recruit. And jobs are evolving. We have more offshore wind energy now. There's a major development in this area today with a lot of calls for tender pertaining to our shores, be it the Atlantic or the Mediterranean. And similarly, it's important to take into account the whole range of skills so that the expectations of companies fits in with the kind of training being given young people at schools. Now I'll move on to Être, which focuses on green and renewable areas. Frédéric Matisse, what do you think about the attractiveness of jobs in renewable energies.
La formation représente
We
déjà
always
un
say
demandement pour la
that training in itself is a bottleneck when it comes to the energy transition.
transition. Je vais pas redire les chiffres.
As mentioned, I won't give you the figures once again, but they're quite dizzying,
Va s'amplifier.
and this
Plus les
will
métiers qui ont
be ever
une pyramide
more
inversée.
pronounced.
Le départ à la retraite, donc
Lots of people will be retiring. We have a sort of an upside-down pyramid here, so we really need to train a lot of people in these various fields.
très rapidement,
At Etre,
on a fait un
at
double
the
constat
school,
qui est d'un côté,
we have
80
noted
jeunes qui sortent
that
du système scolaire
80,000 young people leave the school system without any diploma, and a lot end up being unemployed. We have a million jobs which will be created in the area of the energy transition by 2030.
au sens large. Donc,
I'm talking about the broad sense of the word energy transition. So the idea is to create a match between this mass of young people and the need to fill jobs.
de faire correspondre en fait ces deux enjeux. Voilà pour ce qui est sur le sujet.
That's what I wanted to say in this specific area. We have 26 schools in France at present, and they've all noted the same
On
thing.
ne parle pas de ces possibilités
People
de
talk little
formation et d'emploi dans les
about training and employment
orientations. On n'en parle
in
pas ou très peu.
the energy transition field
On a quand même,
in terms of
juste avant, mais
and people who give young people guidance when choosing their job.
manuel au sens large.
We have this image of manual jobs, which is reinforced in this area, that is renewable energies. The General Secretariat for Ecological Planning has noted that this is an issue. It's absolutely necessary. It is urgent, as we have been saying. It is urgent to train people, but prior to that, we'll need to train all the people who provide guidance to kids at school, to train them to talk about our field as well. You've been referring to the young generation. You're not the spokesman for young people in Occitanie. Florian, you're talking just on your own behalf, but I would like to ask you why, in your view, young people don't naturally turn to renewable energies. One could say, well, they are concerned more than anyone else. They want to have a planet that is still habitable. So why are not more young people working towards this area? It's very interesting to talk about the place of young people in renewable energies. Why do so few young people embark on this area in terms of a future job? This is probably linked to the general guidance given young people, particularly when it comes to technical jobs. We could talk about industry or agriculture, where there are thousands and thousands of jobs that will have to be filled in the years to come. Here we're talking about energy, granted. I think we face a major challenge. How can we encourage young people who are entering the job market to move towards an area where they may not necessarily be the highest paid, but an area which is essential? I remember when I was in secondary school, the guidance I got focused heavily on certain avenues which are linked to the professional world. Granted, I got my school leaving diploma some years ago. What I'd like to say, however, is that we can't just talk about professional training, preparation for engineering school and universities. I had a literary and artistic bent, but I went into the scientific field, and in fact I was guided into areas which were quite a far cry from my initial loves. So perhaps we need to enable young people to learn more about the sector of renewable energies. I'd never heard about it, whereas I'm keenly interested in ecological transition in the broad sense of the word. So I think there's a general lack of knowledge about these jobs and these opportunities that do exist. Also, There are a lot of young people who might like to commit to the environment. Perhaps, however, this concerns only a fraction of the population. Often, young people are born in a given system whereby just a series of very small gestures will help to save the planet. That could encourage them to move in this direction. But renewable energies do remain an industry. The most natural path when it comes to the environment, well, this is something young people can wonder about. We should give them other perspectives. They need to get more objective information about renewable energies. Thank you. It's very interesting to hear from young people. In the Occitanie, why is renewable energy so unattractive, really? Why does it not appear more attractive to young people? Well, there's a large minority, perhaps only, of young people who are committed to the energy transition. How can one explain this? I think we have to refer to state and political action. What's our vision of the world? How do we talk about the world? How can we politicians take up these absolutely overwhelming challenges? In the current context, for example, everything is very negative. There are a lot of ill winds when it comes to developing renewable energies. People talk about cutting budgets for organic farming, green energies, but these are essential in terms of the transition. Hence, the storytelling behind this area makes renewable energies, doesn't make them very attractive for young people. So this is linked to our political statements, our own engagement, the way we portray the world. I think there are a lot of influencers, people in the media who discuss the energy transition, but we haven't created a really fertile ground. We haven't created momentum to upscale. Look at the number of jobs available that this will create and the financial means available. The financial means will have to be huge, and instead of mobilizing more means, on the contrary, we're talking about reducing budgets and taking up matters to a lesser degree. And I'm not talking about France. The same is true of the United States. We're in a time which is not very conducive to the development of this area. Some young people are becoming deeply engaged because they're looking for true meaning when it comes to doing something, when it comes to finding a job which matches one's own personal values, convictions, and objectives. But it doesn't pay all that well necessarily. These are not jobs. We're talking about farming, for example, agriculture. These are not amongst the best paying jobs. We hear people say this, but only a minority of people mention the young people or less young people who, in fact, agree to be paid less because they'll find something more in their professional choice. They're prepared to live in a more modest way in order to align their lifestyle with their own values. At school, people talk a lot about competition, more noble areas of work than technical jobs. When we helped our children decide on what they wanted to do later in life, we also had to contend with a lot of conflicting goals. We obviously want our children to aim at excellence. That is the overarching presentation of the situation, and it doesn't encourage young people necessarily to venture out and do something different. You talked about personal values, one's innermost values, but we don't focus much on that, because that's what really enables us all to achieve personal fulfillment. So this is an overall vision of the world. It's a political stance, which seems to be crumbling a little bit, but we have to continue to act, and that's what we continue to do. And I believe that will be the subject of the next question.
So now we're going to be asking the question about what we can do to make these trades more attractive, these careers. And so when we talk about influencers, there perhaps there's a lack of influencers, perhaps. So perhaps it's a problem related to communication. How can we communicate better about these options? I think before we start talking about how we can communicate, we've got to really work on the basis which is that in terms of media and on a political level, there's a kind of fallacious position which shouldn't really be there in relation to nuclear and renewable energies. In actual fact, this discourse doesn't really serve either nuclear or renewable energies, and so this dispute really leaves aside the problem of fossil fuels. And during this debate, during this time, if they are finding this type of opposition in political spheres, particularly on the right in Parliament, at the National Assembly, there may still be interests involved here. This is another debate, but this comes back in the debates and comes back in the media. And what's actually happening is that we tend to say that renewable energies are not the future, nuclear is now or never, whereas in fact what we should be saying is that if we want to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, we have to electrify. In order to do this, it's renewable energies that we have to use now, and these have to be supported by nuclear. It's not one against the other, it's one with the other. And I think we always tend to confuse the energy mix and the electric mix. We have an electrical mix which is low carbon, of 65% nuclear. We have 11% of hydraulic. We have 10% of wind and polar and solar, which is increasing. And so we don't have an electric mix. But if we talk about an energy mix, oil is 60%. And so to reduce this part of oil, we have to increase electricity through mobility or giving people the taste for renewable energies and nuclear. But to think about electricity and to speak about it in the right terms. And in fact, we're lacking young people who talk about renewable energies and possibly energy transition, ecological transition. But I think it's important as well to be aware that it's a generation which is much more aware of the issues related to climate change. A lot of young people who I discuss with and the people I work with have clearly decided to never take a plane. And in my generation, for example, I was born at the end of the 1980s, 90s. Is that true? I wouldn't say so. And now we have young people, and we also have, I hope, ambassadors, and these are people who are really spokespeople for this young generation. This is why I'd like to come back to what was just said about the fact that there's no access to photovoltaics farms or to wind farms. 2 years, it's been 2 years at France Renewable. We've set up the transition generation, which is to open up these wind and solar farms in partnership with rectorates and secondary school heads to really introduce young people and to be able to have hands-on contact with what we consume. There's a national committee for offshore, for example, and there's a young person who's about 20 years of age who was in my round table who said something which was very true, I felt, that why should we hide what we consume? So you can see between the problems in terms of disturbing the landscape and the attitudes of young people, I think there's a disparity. And what I'm seeing now is the question I'm asking is, what can we do about this? You represent the sector. So in 2000, you're going to be launching an information portal, and we'll need this, young people and other people, to find out, to know how much we can earn when we decide to go into these career fields. Absolutely. I think it was important as well to explain why we were doing things as well as how. So at the beginning of January 2025, we've been working on this project for the last 3 years now with various subjects, for example, and the fairs that we are setting up so that people can have contact with these careers. We're working with France Travail to set up an organization which is going to be able to talk about jobs and training. So we're waiting for this convention to be signed to move on. But the new thing is that as of 2025, we'll be setting up a dedicated internet site for careers and information. There's a lot of work that's been carried out by my colleague who's here, who's on the stand, to really list all the jobs or the careers with the pay that are associated with this. So if we want to be a technician today, there's a single list which has been set up by France Travail, and all the jobs which were referenced by the Rome Agreement should be part of this. So we've listed all the information related to energy transition, and I think we're already working with maintenance technicians to do better and to do more. So because we've just been talking about raising awareness, I'm going to ask Elisabeth Breda about the types of action that is being carried out at the moment to raise awareness. Yes, we do quite a lot, actually, and we never do enough. But I think that we're doing pretty well, generally. We'll see. So the first thing I'd like to say is that at local and national level, what you've just said is the convention with France Travail, I think, is very important. But the idea is to be able to work with what I would call the employment and training and guidance context. The idea being to subscribe to this system, to get to know it, to change it, and to be able to open up these farms, the wind and solar farms. It's a great idea because it's important to be able to see and understand and to have hands-on contact with these farms so that people can participate in the transition generation. And it means that we should be opening up our solar and wind farms, bring people to hydroelectric plants, for example. And when we were talking about the question of influences earlier, our colleagues, we're a company with a mean age is quite young. These are people, men and women, who are working in a scientific sphere. And when young people come along to visit, they have somebody who's close to them, somebody that they can discuss with, and someone they feel they can ask questions to. This is important. So we know a lot about the transition generation. We also organize in different ways. For instance, we have organized visits this year to where we have a little new system for a school in Paris, and another one which is in Occitanie. And we got them together. These are schools that got together. And so there were going to be several activities, a visit to a sun farm, the Mayol farm. And in addition to that, the school in Paris had a pre-qualification study. And so they visited a wind farm, which was not too far away, in the Marne, to look at the construction of this park. And a young woman came along who was able to discover this sector. And after a period of a month, we had she applied for a job with us to come along and train with us. So we have to be modest, obviously. Other people are involved in this impact, but it was really a way of providing training in relation to health and security, health and safety. So you were talking about wind farms, solar farms, and you work with a private establishment apparently as well, with people at high school age. Yes, it's our project. For the time being, what we're doing is, well, we can produce electricity, we know this, and we can cultivate this at the same time, which means that today we have jobs which are hybrid. The solar, for example, there is a kind of hybrid effect. So first of all, we build the farm. The idea is not to build a farm and then look at operations. The idea is to create this at the same time, simultaneously. So we set up together with a high school. This is a professional agricultural lycée. It's a private lycée, and we try to raise awareness amongst the farmers and the with the idea of saying that if you adopt this approach, if you decide to go in this direction, it's not a warning that we're issuing here, but we're saying it's important to be able to prepare yourselves so that you're able to integrate this approach and you can find out about it. There are two other operators who are working with this high school. And the idea is that to set up, for example, a plant with farming, with agriculture. So we show that we show them what we do. The idea being to be able to train young people on this hybrid approach, as well as giving them, they may choose to do this or not, but at least to be able, the idea to give them a chance of it, imagining that they could do it. So you're working with young people. You know that we're trying to interest younger people. We have to be inventive to do this, and we have to do it from a kind of a game approach. So you have hackathons, for instance. Yeah, the idea is to give them a kind of game-based approach, not to be too frontal, and it works fairly. An over-frontal approach doesn't work very well with young people, so we have to do things differently and be more innovative. In the forums, so as well as the various dedicated events in the schools. And so we come along with formats which really get the discussion going with young people. It might be to do with workshops related to the climate, for instance, or the causes and the results of climate change and global warming. And on the basis of that, we then open up the discussion to future jobs, how people can respond and what people can do, and how this can affect their choice of a career in the future. We do this in terms of climate change. We do this with when we work with other types of institute or schools. We look at, for example, ways of learning. We look at patrons as well. We set up solutions. The young people invent solutions to make the sector attractive. So things have really evolved a great deal in terms of the way that we go about trying to raise awareness. So obviously, we thought that the social networks obviously work really well. Social media is ideal. But the young people also want to have a concrete approach, a tangible approach. They want to meet professionals and have, a tangible approach. So we changed our approach. We don't just rely on social media. I'd really like to salute all the work that's been done by the Occitania region. They have competence in terms of training for jobs. And I think that we've got off to a good start. I think we're really facing the challenge quite well with events like job orientation events for the new generation. This new generation, when they come along to the fairs, the idea is completely changed now. People don't just come along with their own firms, with their own system of communication. We all get together to show the reality behind the job and to have people who are able to give direct testimonials of what the job really entails. So there's a really different approach to what these trades and careers actually represent. It'll take us a bit of time because we're talking about representation, the way people see things. We want to reindustrialize the country, but we're not necessarily putting out the right image to do so. People are looking at perhaps other alternatives for their children. But the process is certainly underway. So we've obviously, this is an easy shift towards talking about what's happening in the region. What are you actually doing in the region? Valerie was talking about some of your activities. Yes, guidance, career guidance is one of the ways in, but it can be problematic. The guidance starts in secondary school at lycée, which is a very important point for young people, and which where there are a lot of closed doors. It's terrible to see families which cannot find the right kind of guidance for this, for the internships, what the students, the young people are supposed to be doing. We need a platform a bit like Tinder, for instance, to get relationships going between companies and the young people at secondary school to find the internship that they need. So there are a lot of companies in the transition sector at the moment, big groups as well, people involved in producing energy or networks, and they're prepared to receive these young people for their internships rather than making coffee or making photocopies. It's a real orientation. And we really are trying to move towards people. So we have the mobile house for guidance. We go to different places, to rural areas, to city areas, in poorer areas. We go in as well with these new digital tools that we can use with video modules as well. And so this is the second way in which we work. And then we're working together with the Être schools who accompany us as well. They've been supporting us for some years. And we've really dealt with the question of the career path of young people, not only the careers, but the school period leading up to that. And so sometimes the revenues are not really appropriate. So we've set up young ecology revenues for people to be able to house themselves, train themselves right up to their professional projects, which can be the creation of an activity, for example, or a business in the transition sector. In real terms, the trainings are tagged, and it's very wide. It might relate to organization with young people or events. We raise awareness of young people about the environment and the climate. And so we tag these types of training, between 700 and 1,000 euros per course. So to prepare people, to prepare young people. So this is the way in which the region provides revenues for people, to allow people to subsist during this period. I'd like to come back to something that you said earlier about energy, because it's true that energy is not the easiest object to deal with. It's not an object which can be identified with commitment or fighting for the climate or biodiversity. It's a field which is rather remote, and in the public debate, this is the case, not only in terms of nuclear, but there's a split, really, in the different territories, and this also produces tensions or even violence between the various actors and associations within our territories. So it's not it's an important object, and the young people and older people who are committed need to make sure that their values are shared. Things like solidarity, for example. I think the question of commitment, to come back to what you were saying earlier, I think the technological object in itself is not enough unless it's associated with other values or other objectives. So I think one of the ways that we can work better in terms of this representation that we're talking about is to be able to work on a much more transversal basis, cross-cutting, and looking at energy within the various models of payment. We're building, we're renovating housing, for example, and the energy issue is absolutely central in this kind of activity as well. Energy is everywhere, and I think we have to be able to integrate it and make it much more ecosystemic in terms of our approach. As a way of entering into a career, rather than saying, okay, you're going to be a technician, a maintenance technician. I think we have to be wider in terms of working with the different sectors and coming back regularly to the notion of frugality or sobriety. So it's not an object which is isolated. And we do see a sector which is very attractive for young people, which is everything to do with low-tech and the circular economy. And I think here the energy question is absolutely central in this area. When we talk about mobility as well, the circular economy, we're going to be collecting, storing, and redistributing. The question of mobility is a very good vector for debate and is very attractive and really makes people think about energy in terms of production, consumption, and sharing. I think what you're saying here is that we need to give more meaning to these jobs, and you absolutely share this point of view. This is what you do with the être schools. We don't train technicians. We're training men and women who are committed to this transition. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I must have shouted into the mic there. I didn't mean to. Thank you very much, Agnes, for talking about the young people's ecology revenue, which is specific to the Occitania region. So I think it's interesting to be able to draw on your experience, hoping that it'll be developed in other regions with an issue related to what we were talking about earlier, which is the importance of discussing with all the professionals involved in guidance. I wanted to come back to something, and this is a link to the idea of the storytelling of influencers. We have the person in charge of our web communication who set up a YouTube chain. She's not the influencer, but you can see on this chain, we can see young people talking about their own experiences. So this, I really do encourage you to look at this site, which is exceptional and will definitely lead to a lot of young people wanting to go in this direction. We were talking about meaning and commitment. This is absolutely true. There's also a question related to the careers themselves, or the jobs. Today and for several years, maybe the last 60 years, people say, okay, so if you succeed at school, you go into an intellectual job. Otherwise, you'll go into a technical job. And I think academic success was always associated with an intellectual job. So I think there's really an issue related to the way the way we present the careers, and the way we deal with manual work. And it's important for us to be able to construct this ecological transition. I was talking about this with an artisan not very long ago. He installs solar panels, and he was saying, so, okay, you say that you do an intellectual job, and people say that I do a manual job. You're sitting at your desk with your computer every day. You simply work with your head. And me, in my case, with grey economy, the circular grey energy in the grey circular economy, I may be setting up solar panels, but there's a whole series of work which precedes this, which involves some intellectual and manual work. So I think I'm not quite sure how we can designate these transition jobs, but there's a lot of people are here on my team actually today. But recently we set up a tribunal, really, about manual intelligence and the importance to really give value to this type of activity. And we saw the desire of a lot of training organizations and professionals saying, yes, and there's a real issue. It's really important to make sure that we get the story right about these jobs. And so we're going to be looking at the various actions that we can carry out. What actions do you think will be relevant to make these jobs more attractive?
Well, it's not really my field. I don't have much experience in that specific area. However, when it comes to youth, you have to be consistent. What I mean, as we said, young people feel deeply concerned by climate change, inter alia. Some become quite engaged, others less so. But one shouldn't say, well, some people aren't aware of it or don't want to do anything about it. You have to reach out to this public. That's important to underscore. We talked about competition between various sectors earlier on. The aeronautical sector, for example, young people. You said that young people decide not to take planes anymore. There's a lot of competition between two sectors which are at opposing ends of the spectrum. Do young people move towards aviation because they want to travel or because it's better paid? Whereas these are industries which are quite close when it comes to the profile of workers. One can even talk about a societal choice, in fact. Of course, the powers that be subsidize air travel to a degree, and I think we need to change that. We need to be more consistent. We need to focus a lot on renewable energies directly. We say we need to produce more renewable energy, more solar energy, for example. But I'd like to ask the following question. Why all this energy, historically speaking? Energy, one form of energy doesn't replace another. You add them together. We're replacing fossil fuels by renewable energies, perhaps, but every time you add a new form of energy, you increase the amount of energy produced and consumed without reducing the actual consumption. There's been a slight drop in the consumption of fossil energy over the past few years in Europe, mainly because of economic and political reasons, not because of any government policy. So I think we really need to say, okay, we need to replace current sources of energy by clean energy, solar energy. At the same time, we need drastically to reduce our consumption of energy. We need to scale back our energy use. We need to learn how to live with much less energy. I belong to a generation, for example, where everything runs on electricity. Videos, hoovers, bikes, everything is electric now. In other words, we use energy constantly. We're a far cry from a situation where energy is used only if you really need it. In 10 or 15 years, for example, we'll simply have to make certain choices. Are we going to use our energy for hospitals or for artificial intelligence? We'll really find ourselves in the horns of a dilemma. Are these questions being asked? Does the renewable energy sector really wonder about these matters? And just to be consistent, we talk a lot about photovoltaics in France. Renewable energy in France, that should focus a lot on wood. French forests, however, are not in a good state. Because of the drought, they are absorbing less CO2. And then we have hydroelectricity. But people don't know how to design a dam anymore. And heat pumps are in a good position. And biogas, for example, is expanding. So the real situation is a far cry from the perception of young audiences, young publics today. And I want to further underscore the need for consistency. I understand that one can oppose renewable energies and nuclear energy. People talk more about fossil fuel. When discussing the energy transition, even if there isn't really a transition, you don't add or replace energies, you add them all together. We could talk about greenhouse gases, which threaten our very existence on Earth. And this is part of the 9 limits when it comes to living on Earth. Out of the 9 limits which enable us to survive as a species and a civilization, we have gone beyond 6 thresholds. So renewable energies shouldn't be focused on to the detriment of biodiversity, for example. France has a number of projects in the area of solar panels in nature reserves or areas that haven't been developed industrially. I think we should try and produce more renewable energy, but not if we're going to cut down forests or shrubland, because that is a problem in the minds of young people. It's not a beautiful image of the industry Industry is to the detriment of nature, human beings, and the right of future generations to live properly on this planet. That's what young people believe. We are saying that what we do must be meaningful. So there's a problem of information, a problem of communication, a problem of meaning when it comes to training. And even if you do provide the training, there may be an issue. Entrepreneurs find it difficult to recruit. What do? They turn to training entities. But training programs find it difficult to attract young people. We've been talking about the attractiveness of this area in general since the beginning of this session. Recruiters try to recruit, and upstream you have the training program. And if young people don't feel that they really want to embark on in this area, then the training and programs won't attract young people. As Sylvain has said, you have some professional diplomas which are designed to prepare to train maintenance technicians, and they're having difficulty recruiting. So in other words, we don't seem to be working in the right direction. This is one of the reasons why it's very, very important for us to address this matter altogether in a systematic way. Training programs, of course, have a part to play. Earlier on, Sylvain, you talked about identify the various training programs available, and you have campuses which are at your service. That's what we all do in our own specific areas. So it might be a good idea to talk more about these training campuses. And we have a national network which could also help in this respect. The idea is better to identify training programs available. We worked under the aegis of the strategic committee that deals with renewable energies, and we work with UNICEF. The idea was to give a label to training programs in the energy transition. If you go onto the portal of UNICEF, all the diplomas, we started with the diplomas, then we'll go a bit further later on, of course. We've already identified 100 diplomas linked to the energy transition, so that young people, when they're deciding what they want to do later in life, and the UNICEF portal is a very good tool, so that young people can easily identify the professions or the jobs which might not naturally have occurred to them, which might not have appeared meaningful when it comes to the energy transition. That makes me think about welders. Welding, that's heavy industry, polluting industry, but we need welders as well in a nuclear power plant. And we need welders for wind energy too. If we don't have welders, we can't bring about this energy transition. So you have a whole series of things which need to be tackled.
Le système de formation avec les problématiques d'emploi, il faut qu'on aborde ça.
We need together to deal with the problem of training and jobs. Earlier on, we talked about some wonderful projects which were coming about. All the players are mobilized now. I would even venture to say that we have to combine our efforts more. We have to coordinate better so that we have more impact and waste less time. We need to be aware of what all the various players in this area are doing so that we can really coordinate our activities together. We need also to reach out to the young people around the country and address all these topics. Mathis, how do you work with the ETRE schools? How do you make this training attractive? You work with Valorem to build customized training programs, and what's the upshot? What's the result? I love what's happening here. It really shows the importance of being consistent. We urgently need manpower, and young people are looking for true meaning.
notamment chez les jeunes, mais pas que en fait. Je crois que
But
en fait, c'est
we're not talking only about young
qui
people.
déroule parce qu'on commence à se poser une question sur l'énergie et puis en fait,
You start by wondering about energy, and that will lead on to another question. You have to be consistent. We can't neglect any aspect of the problem. I think it's wonderful to focus on this idea of being more consistent.
Cette recherche de cohérence nécessite un temps qui n'est pas forcément corrélé avec le besoin.
But that takes time, and that makes it difficult to really fulfill the crying need for trained human resources. Basically, the idea is to align the training of people with this quest for meaning. It takes time. We took time with Valorem. It took time to understand who we were, respectively, and what our goals were, what kind of audiences we were reaching out to. But bit by bit, we will be creating sort of custom-made short training courses to enable young people to find jobs with Valorem or other companies. So we have to combine this idea of consistency, technical training, and meaning. Okay, on the basis of your work with Valorem, the idea is to then apply this across the board. Yes, indeed. When we started to develop, well, it took us 10 years to build the first school, and in 7 years we went from 1 to 26 schools. In other words, we created a flourishing development of this kind of schools. There's a lot at stake, so we really have to train a lot of people. But even if we are growing at a very sustained pace, as you can see, it's a very quick pace. We're trying to move fast. But we're only talking about 8 or 9 or 1,000 young people being trained every year. 8 or 9 more schools, 1,000 more young people. And that doesn't necessarily fulfill all the needs. So what we're trying to do is to develop schools, granted. At the same time, we're working with existing training entities and companies in order to really boost the amount of training available, the number of people being trained. You talked about welders, I think. One could talk about welders, but welders in the context of the energy transition. Okay, you're doing this work jointly with the ETRE schools. What does Valorem expect from this partnership? It's, yes, we work on the basis of partnership. It does take time. Thank you for mentioning this. Partnership with Valorem existed before I joined the company. I'm a young beginner, as you can see. For the past 3.5 years, I've been working with Valorem, and it takes time. I don't know. We talked these matters over for some time before actually going on to do things. And it does take time. You need to take time. This time is necessary. And you talked about scaling back on the use of energy. I agree with that concept. In a company, one can say that the electrification of uses, granted, but if we want to be consistent with our own values, we have to scale back on our use of energy. We are a company that has a mission. We want to build, to develop equipment in renewable energies, and this, we feel, must be consistent with the idea of transition, consultation. We work with the various territories People talk a lot about territorial responsibility. And territorial responsibility for us covers the relationship we have with local partners. With these schools, we started to work in a given territory. This work is ongoing. We'll soon be signing a convention, an agreement, to make this scheme perennial. Valorem has taken the decision to continue financing certain activities that have proved their worth. The school will be able to continue with awareness building among schools. And when you do this, what happens? You may say, okay, maybe people will discover they have a vocation. This young person who's heard about this may talk about it with others, and we have to work with the whole field of activity. We've been referring to trends. We're talking about children in schools, in secondary schools, who aren't yet ready for the job market, but we work on the basis of guidance and orientation, but over time. This all takes time, as I have said. In the question we're talking about today, we should talk about all the possible audiences. Yes, indeed, I wanted to come to that point. We will indeed be addressing this. How can you attract all the different audiences, all the different age groups? You work with people who are unemployed, who've been unemployed for a long time, with the adult population as well. We've talked a lot about giving young people information about possible job opportunities, giving them some professional guidance. The idea is we don't want to leave anyone by the wayside. We have to broaden our target audience. In other words, the idea is to work with those who are looking for a new job. We have to work on retraining as well. There's some sectors of activity, like renewable energies, which are developing fast. They're growing beautifully. Other sectors, however, are in difficulty, and people are losing jobs. So retraining people is a very important topic. During the last reform of vocational training, people talked a lot about retraining schemes, and the reform has been very worthwhile, but it didn't focus an awful lot on retraining. So I do think we need to focus on this and reach out to these other groups of people who are losing jobs in sectors which belong to the old-fashioned economy, and encourage these people to move on to renewable energies and other newer sectors. Of course, they need training, but to retrain, you need time. We're not talking about a very short training module, which will be sufficient. On the contrary, we're talking often also about people who work in a totally different sector, how to encourage them to move into electricity, into maintenance. We have to change training schemes, reassure people about their skills, what they're able to do. That's something that takes time. So, how do you work on these matters? How do you try and attract a broader public to our sector at Valorem? I'd like to refer to what we call a social clause. We have agreements with enterprises, and these social clauses state that, for example, foundations, civil engineering, some work should be set aside for people who are in the process of being retrained. The first convention dates back to 2016 approximately. We work with a whole host of entities that help people who's lost their jobs to retrain. I'm trying to look for the right term, says the speaker.
Donc, on travaille avec les
We
facilitateurs
work
des clauses aussi qui nous
with
accompagnent sur les territoires.
facilitators who work with us in various areas, which all have their own specificities. So we work with a number of private entities as well who've decided to work in this area. Our idea is to indulge in what we call responsible purchases, and the idea is to, for example, in landscape gardening, we talk a lot about the environment. Maybe someone doesn't want necessarily to become a landscape gardener, but just find a new job. The idea is to help them to discover new sectors of activity. We encourage people to come and visit our parks, for example, to help them understand what the purpose of maintenance and gardening is. And we also teach them about energy, renewable energies. All these things are designed to be food for thought. So these are some of the initiatives we have taken. And we work in these areas with the network of ed schools. We work in these territories where the ed schools are located. Simon Roussel, recruitment. Should companies also change their methods of recruitment? Yes, I think this was ably stated in the course of the roundtable. We need to reach out to different profiles, other profiles. It's not just engineering schools that rank in amongst the top 3 schools, or the business schools, the top business schools. I think one should reach out to more technical schools where you need certified, clear training. Engineers as well, but civil engineers can also become project managers in renewable energies. So we need to stop recruiting only people with diplomas. We need to recruit people who are motivated and engaged in renewable energies. It's necessary, similarly, to talk about human resource managers and recruiters. What do you ask a human resource manager to do today? Marketing, speak to schools, address schools, in addition to everything else. These are different professions almost. In the bigger companies, there are several people who are in charge of recruitment, and you can't ask only one person in a company with 150 people to manage all these different fronts. To work on the employer brand, that's a huge responsibility within the company. You need to reach out to schools. You need to reach out to other training programs to talk about renewable energies. It's not just the human resources person or the recruitment person who should go and do all this. It's maintenance technicians who should go out and talk about the opportunities in this field. Similarly, in a services company, for example, people often talk about jobs. That's why I'm very happy to talk about recruitment and jobs. No, I can't hear myself at all, says the speaker.
Ça va aller. Alors, oui, effectivement, il y a aussi cette question de se dire, côté pompier de service, à chaque fois, on considère que l'emploi, c'est
People always think that employment
une des problématiques, et c'est souvent en bas de la pile de la problématique.
is not the most important issue.
C'est déjà trop tard.
But if you wait for employment to become the key issue, then it's too late.
C'est déjà un fait. Donc maintenant,
because then you have to cope with the status quo. When you talk about employment, you have to talk about investment, the upfront investment companies have to make. The investment companies have to make. That's an investment that also the powers that be need to make.
Question absente de cette table ronde, c'est la question.
Indeed.
On revient toujours aux
We haven't
représentations.
talked about it much so far, but
des métiers très genrés.
we need to say that these jobs are often fairly gender specific.
De la trajectoire de la formation
So when you talk about training
collégienne,
young people, giving them advice on what jobs to embark on, you have to also be aware of the gender issue.
d'accès aux filières
Access to the scientific and very technical jobs is often
diminuées et non pas augmentées.
not attractive. These are areas that are not attractive to young girls. There are fewer and fewer young girls and many more boys. So the region can take action in this area. Bus drivers, for example. There was a huge shortage of bus drivers in the region because the region deals with school transport and interurban transport. So we really rolled out a specific program in order to train young women. Young women and older women, women of my age. The idea being for women to benefit from this kind of training as well. In the space of 2 years, the number of women bus drivers in Occitanie has doubled or even tripled. So this needs commitment. It needs a strong will on the part of the powers that be. The idea being to ensure that young women dare or want to work in the sector of renewable energies. When it comes to engineers, there's a much better gender balance, but when it comes to technicians, it's mainly men. Now let's look at wind power or the electrification of the grid. You have to work at a height. Say you have a child who loved going to circus school or who loves climbing, for example. On the basis of this love for certain activities, one could encourage the child saying, well, you can continue to work at a great height if you go into this or that job. So this is a manner of talking about certain jobs in a different manner, in a different way, and that could be quite decisive. You could make the jobs much more attractive if you call on the young people's imagination. And there's another thing that we haven't talked about so far, but which plays a decisive part, I believe, when it comes to retraining. And here I'm referring to the trade unions. We haven't talked about them much. Maybe we didn't think about them, but I believe that it's very important to involve the trade unions when there is a crisis, when a lot of people are laid off, for example, in the diesel engine field. The idea would be to work with trade unions and coordinate with them to help in terms of retraining. We have to ensure that trade unions tackle this matter, that people talk about it within the companies, in our various territories, in our various regions. In France, we can review our manner of working on such matters. We have to be consistent. We have to. We don't talk enough with the other social partners. The idea would be to bring about a consensus, even if there are topics of dissent. We need to involve all the partners in this general public discussion. There are a number of techniques one can use in order to foster dialogue and discussion. The idea would be to develop a consistent project with all these entities in addition to the governing bodies. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to the room, I might ask Florian the following. What do you think about what's just been said? What lessons do you think can be learned? I think so far it's been extremely interesting. A number of topics have been addressed.
If we try to attract new publics, and the question of gender obviously is important, and you can have a look at the proportion in terms of gender, in terms of the people who are here today. But there are also people who tend to be younger. I know a number of people through my private circle of friends who are not necessarily working in areas that are disappearing, but they feel that there's a kind of running down in terms of the working conditions. And so if we need such a lot of labor, we shouldn't. If we call on people with 30 years experience who are 50 years old, and they can look at the way in which these could fit in with projects and objectives. And so I think it's important to look at this possibility for transversality as well. I represent young people, that's what I'm here for, but I mustn't overlook the fact that it's a project that has to be part of a society, renewable energies. And perhaps we should look at things on a much more human scale. And this is what we referred to earlier when we were talking about young people. You were talking earlier about young people not drawing the solar panels on the roof of their houses. It's because it's not something which is necessarily anchored in the notion of society today. Perhaps we need something which is a little bit closer to individual consumer units, producing your own energy and to reach the levels of frugality that we are targeting. Thank you very much. Yes, I think we do deserve a round of applause. Would you like to come back? Would you like to react to what's been said, or perhaps give your own talk about your own experiences? We'll hand a mic around. Thank you very much to the lady in the front. So if you could just introduce yourself. Hello. Hello, I'm in charge of a mission in Ariège about renewable energy, and I don't need to convince people to switch to renewable heating. I know because. And we represent local authorities and individuals. I think for the challenge adapting to climate change, which is obviously urgent, it's our elected representatives who represent. They should represent an example. And I think the training in new areas in the territories is a subject which is new. We need to be able to train the elected representatives as well. Thank you very much for your comment, because I don't know whether there's a reaction here, which this should assist. Yes, I don't think that all the elected representatives are necessarily examples of this. I think it's important to have training for elected representatives and territorial civil servants as well. We're carrying out, we have to have a training which is very much focused on renewable energies and development. It's important. I think the public authorities has a role to play in terms of purchasing and renewing public buildings, and the climate change agencies are working together with the ADEME. We finance heat information networks, and on a national basis, when you reduce by half the green funds, for example, i.e. all the means that were destined to renovation for schools or rainproofing schools due to climate change, this sends out a very counterproductive signal. And the communes don't necessarily have the means required to really go for these projects, which involve quite considerable budgets. And so I think if we're going to carry the message and be exemplary, this takes place at various levels, at various strata of interaction between Europe, the state, and territorial authorities, which today are very finding it difficult to respond after this announcement of the cut in the budget. Yes, so the comment here at in the first row. If you'd just like to introduce yourself. Hello, Casaria Max. I represent the a union in the Haute-Garonne. I'm very interested in Valerem's actions. You were talking about training centers, Tropia. So it's in our territory, in actual fact. I didn't know this because there are obviously communication problems because we didn't know that this type of training existed. I'd like to, in terms of the work that you do, you have developed work in photovoltaics, for example, in the Vernos area. I don't know whether you who you work with, but the number of hours necessary for people who are actually going back into the work world, and to look at this in the context of renewable energies. Another aspect is the use in terms of crowdfunding. I think it's interesting because it's another way of raising awareness amongst the population in relation to the projects that you're responsible for in the renewable energy sphere. Thank you very much. Yes, your neighbor was applauding. Is there another question or a reaction? Yes, there's a question here, right at the back. Oh, right at the end there, on the right. Hello. Could you just introduce yourself, please? Yes. Hello, I'm Nicolas Stode. I'm in charge of an ecological transition for the Foundation for Inclusion. This is more a suggestion, or the remark is after experience in a project which we carried out in the industry in the area. There's a real deficit of scientific culture, technical and industrial culture. And we need to work on this. And the suggestion relates to territorial anchorage, which I think is very important. So in the sector, the renewable sector, wouldn't it be interesting to set up an approach whereby the farms, the wind and solar farms, have a social aspect as well as the educational, in terms of employment and education in the different territories? I totally agree. That's my right. It's absolutely the kind of aims that we're looking at in terms of the members of France Renewable. We have a local anchorage commission, but there's also an economic aspect which comes in. We talked about crowdfunding. We're talking about sharing values, and this is a subject which really is going to be set up. And you were also talking about an initiative which existed amongst our members, which is to finance these studies of young people who are in nearby cities or villages. This is a very important, a very strong approach. And I think this should be set up on a systematic basis. Education, training, and the acceptability of renewable projects is important. I think this comes back to what you were saying very rightly when you were talking about the diversity. The sector has to be exemplary. It has to work on being exemplary. And in fact, in terms of the jobs and training side, this goes through the transition generation to get people to discover these careers and job opportunities. And to do this, they have to be invited to the wind and solar farms by the operators themselves. Any other questions or comments? If not, yes, hello. Hello, madam. There's a question from the lady Yes, it's more a comment, really, than a question in relation to what Madame Langevin was saying about the employability of women in technical jobs. There's an association called Elle Bouge. She's moves, and they're doing great work in promoting technical and engineering jobs for young women, either at engineering school or earlier in secondary school. So they're in schools where there are events where young women can exchange and discuss with the technicians who are working there. So I think this association really does warrant being better known and developed, and all the companies all companies can become partners of the association. I absolutely agree. The association really does warrant being better known. Yes, it's true that this is one of the actions that we carry out as well at YRM. Thanks very much for talking and for bringing it up. I didn't have a chance to do so myself. Thank you very much. Are there other questions or reactions? People like to talk about their own experiences? No, apparently I don't think so. And Agnès Langevin, when we introduced the roundtable, we were discussing, we were talking about the students from Être and students from lycées in Montpellier. And I think you wanted to give them some words of encouragement. Yes, I think you're the person to do this. I really feel that you're the person who would be best placed. I could say these words, but I think you're the person who should do it. We have to invite representatives. Yes. So, if you could just come up to the front. All the speakers here are very well aware of all the different types of actions, the need, the goodwill, or the willpower, and the sense of values. And I think this has all been present in the debate today. You're going to be able to choose what aspects interest you and open up. I hope it's opened up your inspiration, your projects, and your desires. So come up to the front. So, yes, the students from the two schools should be come up so we can discuss this eye to eye.
Voilà, et peut-être après.
And then perhaps, if Énergie Solidaire would like to make a call for the challenge for tomorrow, you're very welcome to do so. So these are the representatives of the two schools. Would you like to say a word or two? Yeah, my name is Gregory Hollande, and I'm the representative of the school, the PPF school, which is the female polytechnic school. You were talking about gender and inclusivity earlier on, so we really wanted to get a lot of young women involved in technical activities. I think it's a good idea to repeat this. Talking about the association, we've got a lot of teachers and engineers who are militant in these associations. Thank you very much for these few words. What about the Être school? Would you like to say a word or two? Yes, the representative is here. Could you like to say a word or two? Hello. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to this event. And it is great. It's really heartwarming to see this round table and at the beginning to see that this topic has come up right at the beginning of the forum to improve the attractiveness of these jobs. And thanks to the region and structures like Valaram, we're in the process of working on this on a daily basis. It's true that it's an issue which is absolutely at the heart of EnerGaïa today. Thank you, all of you. So, a quick picture, photograph of the group. If you just like to move together, yeah. Thanks to all of you for coming here to this first conference of the day. So do enjoy walking around the EnerGaïa fair, and there will be conferences later on this afternoon in EnerGaïa and the other halls.
Merci à toutes et à tous.
Thank you all very much. Bravo.